I can't do this. You've said it. Maybe not out loud. Maybe not to anyone who could do anything with it. But somewhere, in the car on the way home, or at 3 a.m. when the weight of it got too heavy to hold quietly, or in the middle of an ordinary moment that should have felt ordinary and didn't, you've said it. I can't do this. And then you kept going. Because that's what you do. You say I can't do this, and then you do it anyway because the alternative is unthinkable, or unavailable, or just not something you've been given permission to choose. And so the saying and the doing exist side by side, the internal truth and the external behavior in constant low-grade contradiction. That contradiction is what I want to talk about, not to tell you to stop, not to hand you a permission slip to give up on something real, but to be honest about what it costs to keep saying I can't and then doing it anyway. To name the specific damage of that particular self-betrayal, and to ask the question that I think is underneath the phrase in almost every case: what would it look like if you actually listened to it? Let me start with what I can't do this actually means, because it's not always the same thing even when the words are the same. Sometimes it means this specific thing in this specific configuration is beyond what I currently have available, not beyond what you're capable of in absolute terms, beyond what you have right now. The resources, the energy, the emotional bandwidth, the specific capacity that this thing requires aren't currently accessible, not gone permanently, just depleted past the level this requires. Sometimes it means this is not the right path, and some part of me knows it. The thing you've been doing, the relationship you've been in, the version of your life you've been maintaining, some part of you has been registering that it's wrong. Not wrong in a catastrophic, obvious way. Wrong in the quiet, persistent way that things that aren't right for you eventually make themselves known. And I can't do this is that knowledge surfacing, the body's way of saying what the mind has been refusing to say. Sometimes it means I've been doing this in the wrong way and I need to do it differently. The it isn't the problem. The how is. And I can't do this is actually I can't keep doing this the way I've been doing it, which is a different statement, a more solvable one. One that points not at this situation but at your relationship to the situation. And sometimes, and this is the one that deserves the most respect, it means I genuinely cannot sustain this and I need it to stop. Full stop. Not a different approach, not more resources. An actual end to this specific form of whatever this is. Figuring out which one you're in is the first and most important work. Because I can't do this, that means I'm depleted, calls for rest. I can't do this, that means this is wrong, calls for honesty. I can't do this, that means I need to approach this differently, calls for creativity. And I can't do this, that means this needs to end, calls for courage. They're not the same thing. And treating them all the same, grinding through regardless, treats none of them correctly. I want to talk about the specific experience of saying I can't and then doing it anyway, because I think it's more damaging than it's treated as, and the damage is specific enough to deserve naming. Every time you say I can't and then do it anyway, you teach yourself something. The lesson is, what I feel about my own limits doesn't count. The lesson is, the right thing to do is to override the signal rather than respond to it. The lesson is, my inner experience is less relevant than the external requirement. Do it anyway. Keep going. The feeling is not valid information, and you learn that lesson. Your system learns it, because systems learn from repeated experience more than from stated beliefs, and the repeated experiences feel the limit, register the limit, say the limit, and then cross it, over and over, while the internal voice that was trying to tell you something gets quieter and quieter, until it's still saying it, but you're no longer hearing it because you've been trained so well to override it, that the override is now automatic. That's how you lose touch with your own experience. Not through a single dramatic betrayal, through the accumulated practice of treating your limits as suggestions rather than information. Through enough repetitions of I can't, and then doing it anyway, that the I can't stops carrying any weight at all. And then you're in the situation most people who've been high functioning under sustained pressure eventually find themselves in. You don't know what's wrong, you just know something is. You can't quite locate the limit because you've been overriding it for so long that you've lost access to where it is. The signal is still going out, you've just stopped being able to hear it. Here's the cost of not listening. The specific concrete accumulating cost. There's the cost to your body, which I know sounds medical and therefore easy to dismiss. But chronic overriding of your own limits produces real physiological consequences. The stress response that activates when you push past what you have available, the cortisol, the sustained activation of systems designed for short-term crisis rather than long-term grind, those produce real damage over time. To your immune system, to your sleep architecture, to your cardiovascular function, to the specific systems that are supposed to regulate and restore you but can't do that job properly when they're perpetually mobilized. You cannot run on empty indefinitely, not emotionally, not mentally, not physically. The body is not optional, and it has been trying to tell you something. There's the cost to the thing you're pushing through for, because the version of you that shows up when you're saying I can't and doing it anyway is not the version anyone deserves. It's functional. It gets things done. but it's not full, not present, not the quality that would be available if you had the resources to actually show up rather than just show up anyway. The people and situations you're carrying it through for, the ones whose importance keeps you going, they deserve more than the gritted teeth version, and you can't give them more while you're running this depleted. And there's the cost to your own self-knowledge, the loss of access to your inner experience's reliable information, the growing gap between what you feel and what you act on that makes it harder and harder to trust your own read on things, to know what you need to make decisions that actually align with your real state rather than the performed state. That gap is significant, and it compounds every time you override the signal. The gap gets wider and wider, until knowing what you actually need becomes its own difficult project, rather than just listening. I want to say something about the people you're doing this for, because I think they're part of why the override keeps happening. There are people whose well-being is connected to you continuing, whose lives are easier, better, more stable, because you keep going. And you know this, and the knowledge is real weight. You're not doing this for nothing, you're doing it for things and people that matter. And that mattering is part of what makes the stopping feel like a betrayal rather than a necessity. But here's what's also true. The version of you that keeps going at this cost is not the version those people actually need. They need the sustainable version. The one that has something left. The one that shows up with real presence rather than gritted through presence. And the only way to be that version is to take the I can't do this seriously enough to actually do something about it. Stopping or slowing down or changing something fundamental about the configuration is not abandoning the people you're doing this for. It's the only way to eventually give them the version of you that is actually good for them. The current version is not good for anyone, including you, especially you. Here's what I can't do this is actually asking for. In almost every case, underneath all the versions of it, it's asking for honesty. For the honest account of what is actually happening to be said out loud rather than managed silently. For the real state of you to be visible to someone rather than carried privately. For the thing that keeps being said internally but never externalized to finally be given air. It's asking for acknowledgement. For someone, maybe you first before anyone else, to simply acknowledge that this is hard, that what you're doing costs something, that the caring is real and the cost is real and the I can't do this is proportionate information rather than weakness. It's asking for help. Real help. Not the kind where you describe a manageable version of the situation and someone offers a manageable response. The kind where you tell the full truth of it and someone actually steps in, where the weight becomes shared rather than yours alone. Where the configuration changes in ways that make it possible to continue without continuing to pay this cost. And it's asking for permission, the specific permission to be human, to have limits, to need things, to be a person who sometimes can't rather than always can. To step out of the role, whatever role has been assigned or assumed, long enough to be something other than the one who handles it. You can give yourself that permission. It doesn't require anyone else. I want to talk about the specific version of this that lives in relationships, because I think I can't do this gets said most often and most quietly about the people you love rather than the situations you're in. You're in something with someone, and it's not bad. It might even be good in specific ways in the better moments, but there's a version of the truth of it that you've been circling for a long time without landing in. A version that would require saying out loud to yourself, to them, to someone, that you've reached the edge of what you can keep giving to this specific configuration. Not the relationship necessarily, the configuration, the way you've been in it, the version of yourself that keeps showing up for it past the point where showing up is sustainable, a specific dynamic that has been drawing from you more than it returns. And every time you get close to saying, I can't do this, something stops you. The love is real, so you override it. They need you, so you override it. Things have been better lately, so you override it. It would hurt them to hear it, so you override it, and the I can't do this goes back underground, and the configuration continues, and you show up again tomorrow at a cost you keep not accounting for. Here's what I want you to consider. The I can't do this you've been sitting on. What would it actually sound like if you said it out loud? Not to them necessarily, not yet. Just to yourself. Just the full honest version of it. Because there's a difference between I can't do this, meaning the relationship is over, and I can't do this, meaning this specific version of this relationship in this specific form is no longer something I can sustain without costs I'm not willing to keep paying. The second version is actually a conversation, one that might change things, one that might produce the shift in dynamic that makes continuing possible in a way that isn't destroying you. But it requires saying it out loud to the person, in the full and honest version rather than the softened, managed, I'm fine but slightly less available version that has been your approach. You haven't had that conversation yet. You've had the internal version 100 times. You haven't said it to them? Say it. Not as an ultimatum, as a truth, as information about the state of you that the relationship deserves to have. What happens after is not guaranteed, but what happens if you keep not saying it is. I want to address the version of you that is reading this and thinking, but I don't have a choice. I have to keep going. The situation requires it. The people need it. The alternative is worse than what I'm already in. I hear that. I'm not dismissing it. Sometimes the situation really does require what it requires, and the options genuinely are limited. That's real. But I want to ask you to examine whether you fully explored the options. Not theoretically, actually, because there's a specific cognitive distortion that happens when you're deep inside a sustained can't. You stop being able to see the options, not because they don't exist, but because the depth of the situation makes it hard to see beyond it. The immediate reality is so total that alternatives feel theoretical rather than actual. And the people around you, the ones who know the performed handling it version of you, they're not offering options because they don't know options are needed. Because you've been presenting fine, because the I can't do this that lives inside you has never been shared with them at the level that would allow them to respond. So before you conclude that the situation genuinely requires this indefinitely, test it. Tell someone the actual truth of it, not the manageable version, the I actually can't do this version, and see what becomes available when the real state is finally visible. You might be surprised by what moves when the truth is finally allowed to be the truth. What does actually listening to I can't do this look like? Not quitting, not abandoning, not a dramatic collapse. What does actually responding to this signal look like in practice? It looks like stopping to the time you actually need rather than the minimum time you can justify. Not a day off, real time. The amount that would actually make a dent in the depletion rather than just enough to allow you to keep going at the same pace. It looks like telling the truth to at least one person, saying the actual version of what's happening, not the edited one. Letting the weight be visible to someone who might be able to share it rather than continuing to carry it entirely privately. It looks like changing something in the configuration. Something real. Not an adjustment at the margin, but something that actually changes the structure of what you're being asked to sustain. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. And you'll be back here in 3 months or 6 months or a year saying I can't do this again while doing it again. And it looks like taking seriously what your body and your nervous system have been telling you, not overriding the signal. Treating it as the information it is, asking what this signal is pointing at and responding to the answer, rather than pushing through it. You've said it maybe more times than you can count. I can't do this. And then you did it, and then you said it again, and then you did it again. At some point, the saying needs to be met with something different than the same override. At some point, the signal needs to be received rather than suppressed. Not because you're weak, because you're human. Because limits are real, and the body is real, and the ongoing cost of treating your own experience as irrelevant is a cost that eventually becomes impossible to keep paying. You said, I can't do this. That was information, real, important, trustworthy information about the state you're in and what it needs. You're allowed to let it be true. You're allowed to stop overriding it. You're allowed to respond to your own experience as though it matters, because it does. It always has. You just kept telling it to wait. It's waited long enough. Listen, overthinking is killing you. Not literally, but close enough that the word fits. Because what overthinking actually does, what it does to your sleep, your relationships, your ability to just exist in a moment without immediately analyzing it to death, is a slow, quiet kind of damage. The kind that doesn't show up on anything. The kind nobody around you can see. The kind you can't even fully explain to someone who doesn't live inside it. You just know that your brain never stops, that there is no off switch, that the moment something happens, something good, something bad, something completely neutral, a part of you immediately picks it up and starts turning it over, looking for meaning, looking for threat, looking for the thing underneath the thing, and you're exhausted, not from your life, from your own head. That's what I want to talk about, not in an abstract way, in the specific, honest, this is actually what it does to you way that I think most people who overthink have never had fully named for them. Let me start with what it actually costs you, because I think we talk about overthinking like it's a personality quirk, like it's just how some people are wired and it's fine, it's manageable. Drink some chamomile tea and journal about it. It's not fine. It's costing you real things. It's costing you your present. Every moment you spend living inside a conversation that already happened or a scenario that hasn't happened yet is a moment you are not actually in your life. Not in the room, not with the people in front of you, not feeling what there is to feel right now. You're somewhere else in the past replaying something you can't change, or in the future preparing for something that might never arrive. And the present just keeps passing, quietly, without you in it. It's costing you your relationships because overthinking doesn't stay internal. It bleeds out. It changes how you communicate. You either over-explain because your brain has run every possible misinterpretation and you're trying to preempt all of them, or you go completely quiet because saying anything feels like opening a door you won't be able to close. It makes you pull back at exactly the moments you should be moving closer. It makes you read distance into things that aren't distant and miss the actual warning signs because you're too busy analyzing the fake ones. It's costing you your confidence. Every decision that should be simple becomes a referendum on your judgment. Every choice carries the weight of all the ways it could go wrong. And over time, all that second guessing teaches you that you can't be trusted, that your instincts are unreliable, that before you do anything, you need to think it through one more time, just to be sure. one more time becomes the only time you ever operate, and you stop trusting yourself completely. Here's the part I want to name that doesn't get named enough. Overthinking feels productive. That's the trap. That's why it's so hard to stop. When you're running every scenario, when you're analyzing every angle, when you're preparing responses to conversations that haven't happened yet, it feels like you're doing something, like you're being responsible, thorough, like you're the kind of person who thinks things through instead of just reacting. But there's a difference between thinking something through and thinking it to death. Thinking something through has an endpoint. You gather the information, you consider the options, you make a call. Overthinking has no endpoint. It circles, it loops back. It generates new questions every time it answers one. It is thinking that has gotten detached from any useful destination and is now just running, because running is what it does. You're not solving anything, you're just spinning. And the spinning feels like work, so you keep doing it. And meanwhile, the actual thing, the decision, the conversation, the moment, either passes or gets worse because you waited too long inside your own head to address it. And that's the cost. You prepare endlessly for a life you're not actually living. I want to talk about relationships specifically because I think that's where overthinking does its cruelest work. You meet someone, or you're already with someone, and something small happens. A text that's slightly shorter than usual, a tone that's slightly different, a moment where they seem somewhere else, something that a non-overthinking brain would register and file under. Probably nothing. Your brain does not file it under probably nothing. Your brain picks it up and immediately starts building. What did that mean? Why was it different? Is something wrong? Did I do something? Are they pulling away? Is this the beginning of the end? And within 20 minutes you have constructed an entire narrative, detailed, internally consistent, emotionally devastating, about something that was probably just them being tired. And now you're responding to that narrative instead of to reality. You're quieter with them because of the story your brain wrote. You're more careful, more guarded, slightly more distant. And they notice, and of course they notice, and they adjust to your adjustment. And now there actually is a slight distance between you. Not because anything was wrong, because your brain made something out of nothing and you responded to the something and created a version of the nothing that is now real. You worried the thing into existence. That happens more than you think. The distance you're always afraid of, the one you're constantly scanning for, sometimes you're the one creating it, not intentionally, not consciously, just by living inside the story your brain built instead of the reality that was actually there. There's something I want to say about the specific exhaustion of being an overthinker in a relationship with someone who isn't, because the gap between those two processing styles is genuinely one of the hardest things to bridge. You bring something up gently, carefully after having thought about how to phrase it for 3 days, and they look at you and say something like, "I don't know, I wasn't really thinking anything by it," and they mean it. They genuinely weren't thinking anything by it. It was just a thing they said or did, and they've already moved on, and they have no idea you've been carrying the weight of it for 72 hours. And you don't know whether to feel relieved or more anxious, because if they weren't thinking anything by it, then all of that was in your head. And if all of that was in your head, how much other stuff is in your head? And if you can't tell the difference between real signals and fabricated ones, how do you ever trust your own read on anything? So the conversation you tried to have to get clarity ends up producing more questions than it answered, and the cycle starts again. That's not a communication problem. That's not a compatibility problem. That's overthinking making a relationship harder than it needs to be by introducing a third party into every interaction, the version of the other person that exists in your head, running their lines in the scenarios you've scripted, behaving in the ways your anxiety has assigned them. That third party is not real, but they take up a lot of space. Let me talk about where this comes from. Not in a blame your childhood way, though honestly sometimes it is partly that, but in the way that's useful. The way that helps you understand the mechanism so you can start to work with it instead of just being run by it. Overthinking is almost always rooted in one of two things, sometimes both at once. The first is a history of things going wrong in ways you didn't see coming. If you've been blindsided before, hurt in a way you didn't anticipate, by someone you trusted, in a situation you thought was safe, your brain learns a lesson. The lesson is you didn't see it coming last time and it cost you. So this time you will see it coming. This time you will watch for it. This time you will be ready. And your brain takes that lesson seriously. It starts scanning constantly for anything that could be an early signal, for any pattern that resembles the one that came before the hurt. It gets very good at finding those patterns, partly because they're real sometimes, and partly because if you look hard enough at anything, you can make it resemble almost any pattern you're searching for. The second root is a low-grade belief that things won't work out for you specifically, that good things are fragile and temporary and will be taken away, that you are, in some fundamental way, more likely to lose what you love than to keep it. And so the overthinking is partly preparation. If you can anticipate the loss, you can brace for it. You can be ready, and partly a way of maintaining a small amount of control in situations where you feel fundamentally out of control. Neither of those routes make you broken. They make you someone who learned to protect themselves in the only way that made sense at the time. The problem is that protection has outlasted the thing it was protecting against, and now it's protecting you from things that aren't actually threatening. And the protection itself is the thing doing the damage. I want to talk about what overthinking does to your sense of self, because I think this is the part that goes most unacknowledged and does the deepest damage. When you overthink long enough, and when you spend enough time living inside hypothetical versions of events rather than actual ones, you start to lose the thread of who you actually are underneath all the analysis. Because overthinking requires you to constantly model other people, to simulate how they see you, what they think of you, how they're interpreting your words and actions. And the more you do that, the more your sense of yourself becomes contingent on those simulations. You start to know yourself primarily through the imagined eyes of other people. Your self-image becomes a composite of all the ways you've imagined being perceived. That's not a self, that's a performance with no audience. And the real you, the one with instincts and preferences and reactions that don't need to be analyzed before they're allowed to exist, that person gets quieter and quieter the longer the machine runs. Because every time a feeling or an instinct arises, the overthinking brain immediately intercepts it, runs it through the filter, asks whether it's appropriate, whether it's too much, whether expressing it will cause a problem. And most of the time, the feeling gets managed instead of felt, processed instead of expressed, filed away instead of lived. You become someone who is very good at understanding emotions and very unpracticed at actually having them in real time. That's a loss, a quiet, accumulating, significant loss. Here's what nobody tells you about trying to stop overthinking. You cannot think your way out of overthinking. I know how obvious that sounds. I know. But it's genuinely the trap that most people fall into. You start overthinking about why you overthink. You analyze your patterns, you construct frameworks for understanding your anxiety, you research it, you journal about it, you build elaborate systems for catching yourself in the act. And all of that is more thinking, more spinning. You've just redirected the machine at itself and called it progress. The actual movement happens somewhere other than your head. It happens in your body, in learning to notice when you've left the present moment, and practicing the physical act of returning to it. It happens in action, and making the small decision without running it through the full analysis, and finding out that the sky doesn't fall, and slowly building evidence that your instincts are actually okay. It happens in relationships, and telling someone what's happening inside you instead of managing it alone, and finding out that being known doesn't destroy things the way you were afraid it would. It happens slowly, non-linearly, with setbacks that feel like starting over but aren't. And it requires you to do the thing that overthinking was always trying to prevent. Be uncertain. Be in something without knowing how it ends. Be present in a moment without having already lived 6 versions of it in your head. That is genuinely terrifying if you are someone who has been using certainty, even imaginary certainty, as a survival tool. But the alternative is staying in the machine, and the machine is running you into the ground. I want to say something directly to the version of you that is reading this at whatever hour this is, probably not sleeping. Probably turning something over that started as a small thing 3 hours ago and has since become a fully constructed crisis. You are not crazy. You are not broken. You are not fundamentally unable to have peace. You are someone whose brain learned to be very, very busy, and busy kept you safe once. And now busy is just busy. It's not keeping you safe. It's keeping you from resting, from connecting, from being in your own life without the constant background noise of what if and what does it mean and what's going to happen. The thought you're carrying right now, the one that feels urgent, the one that feels like if you just think about it a little longer, you'll finally land on the answer that makes it okay. That thought is lying to you. The answer isn't in more thinking. The answer is in putting it down long enough to find out that the world didn't end when you stopped holding it. You were allowed to rest. Now you've figured it all out. Now, before the resolution, before the certainty, before you've run every scenario to its conclusion. Now, in the middle of not knowing, that's the only place rest is ever actually available. Overthinking is killing you slowly, stealing your sleep, your presence, your relationships, your trust in yourself, your ability to just be somewhere without immediately trying to understand and analyze and prepare for what being there might mean. You know this. You've known this. The problem was never that you didn't understand the damage. The problem is that stopping felt more dangerous than continuing. But you've been doing this long enough now to know that the danger isn't out there. It was never really out there. It was always in here. In the machine, in the loop, in the version of events your brain constructed and then handed you to live inside of. The real thing, your actual life, the people actually in it. The moment's actually happening, that's been waiting for you this whole time, just on the other side of the noise. All you have to do is let the noise get a little quieter. Not gone, just quieter. That's enough. That's all it takes to start. You know what hurts the most? It's not being rejected, it's realizing the person you care about never felt the same way to begin with. Not in the way you did. Not in the way you hoped they did. And the worst part is, you didn't realize it right away. Because at first everything felt real. The conversations felt natural, the laughs felt genuine, the late night talks felt personal. There were moments where it seemed like something deeper was building between you. Little moments that made you believe this could actually turn into something. And when you start believing that, your heart slowly gets involved. Not all at once, but piece by piece. You start paying more attention to them. You notice the way their voice changes when they're excited, the way they talk about the things they care about, the way their mood shifts when something's bothering them. You start remembering small details about them without even trying, things they mentioned once in passing, their favorite music, their favorite food, the stories about their past, and without realizing it, they begin taking up more space in your mind. You think about them when something funny happens. You think about them when you hear a song they would like. You think about them when something reminds you of a conversation you once had. That's how feelings grow, quietly, naturally, without asking permission. But somewhere along the way, something starts to feel different, not wrong, just uneven. You notice that you're always the one starting conversations. You're the one asking questions, the one keeping things going, the one making the effort to stay connected. They still respond. They still talk to you. They still laugh and joke like everything is normal. But something about it feels lighter for them, like they're enjoying the moment, but not investing in it the same way you are. And you try not to think too much about it because you don't want to ruin what you have. You tell yourself you're overthinking. You tell yourself they might just be busy or distracted or maybe just not good at expressing their feelings. So you keep showing up, you keep being patient, you keep being kind. Because part of you believes that if you're consistent enough, if you're supportive enough, if you care enough, maybe one day something will change. Maybe one day they'll look at you differently. Maybe one day they'll realize you were there all along. Maybe one day the feeling will finally grow on their side too. But deep down, there's a quiet fear you try not to face. A small voice that keeps asking the same question. What if they never feel the same way? And that thought is something your heart isn't ready to accept yet. Title: She Doesn't Feel the Same Way. Part 2. The hardest part isn't the moment you realize she doesn't feel the same way. It's everything that happens before that moment. The waiting, the hoping, the convincing yourself that maybe you just need to give it more time. Because feelings don't always grow instantly, right? Sometimes people just need space. Sometimes they need to see your consistency. Sometimes they need to realize what's right in front of them. At least that's what you keep telling yourself. So you keep showing up. You keep answering her messages. You keep making time for her even when your day is busy. You listen when she talks about her problems. You support her when she's stressed. You try to be the person she can always rely on, the person who understands her, the person who stays. And slowly, you start building this idea in your head, not just about who she is, but about who the two of you could be together. You imagine simple things, conversations that haven't happened yet, moments that might happen someday, little scenarios where everything finally clicks into place. And those thoughts feel good. They make the waiting feel worth it. They make the uncertainty easier to ignore. Because as long as there's still a possibility, you don't have to let go of the hope. But reality has a quiet way of revealing itself. Not all at once. Not with some dramatic moment, just small things that slowly start adding up. Like the way she talks about someone else, not realizing how it lands when she says it. Or how she mentions a guy she finds attractive. Like it's just normal conversation. Like it wouldn't affect you. Or the way she disappears for hours, sometimes days, then comes back like nothing happened. And you're just happy she replied at all. Even if the message is short, even if the effort feels minimal, you start noticing the imbalance. But you don't want to believe it means something, because admitting the truth would mean facing a reality you've been avoiding. That maybe you care more than she ever will. That maybe you've been building something in your mind that she never intended to build with you. And the worst part is, she didn't lie to you. She didn't promise anything. She didn't say the words that would make you believe she felt the same way. You just filled in the silence yourself. You interpreted the kindness as something deeper, the attention as something meaningful, the connection as something mutual, but kindness isn't always love. Attention isn't always interest, and connection doesn't always mean someone sees you the way you see them. And slowly, the truth starts getting harder to ignore, not because she suddenly tells you, but because her actions begin saying something your heart can't keep pretending not to hear. She doesn't feel the same way, and the longer you hold on to hope, the heavier that realization becomes. At some point, the truth stops whispering, and it starts becoming impossible to ignore. Not because she finally sits you down and says the words. Most of the time that conversation never even happens. The truth shows up in quieter ways than that. It shows up in patterns, in effort, in the way someone chooses to show up in your life, or the way they don't. You start noticing things you used to overlook. How you're always the one starting the conversation. How if you stop texting first, the silence stretches longer than you expected. Hours, sometimes days, and eventually you break. You send the message anyway, because pretending you don't care feels harder than admitting that you do. You start noticing the energy difference too. How excited you are when she replies, and how normal it seems for her, like your presence in her life is something she can take or leave, not something she's worried about losing. That realization hurts in a very specific way, because you're not asking for everything. You're not asking for grand gestures or dramatic confessions. You're just asking for something simple, to feel chosen. But when someone truly wants you, you don't have to beg for that feeling. You don't have to analyze every message. You don't have to question whether you matter. It becomes obvious, and that's when the realization finally hits you. Not all at once, but slowly, like a weight settling on your chest. She doesn't feel the same way. Not in the way you hoped. Not in the way you needed. Maybe she likes you. Maybe she enjoys talking to you. Maybe she appreciates having you around. But there's a difference between appreciating someone and wanting to build something with them. And you start asking yourself questions you were too afraid to ask before. Was I just convenient? Was I just someone who was always there when she needed attention? Was I just filling space in her life while she waited for someone else? Those thoughts sting. But the deeper pain isn't even about her, it's about what you did to yourself while hoping things would change. How long you ignored your own feelings. How long you accepted less than you deserved. How long you told yourself to be patient, when patience wasn't the solution. Because love doesn't grow out of one person trying harder. Love doesn't appear just because you stayed long enough. Love isn't something you can earn by proving your loyalty, and realizing that forces you to face a difficult truth. You can't make someone feel something they don't, no matter how good you are to them, no matter how much you care, no matter how much you wish it were different. And once that truth settles in, you're left with a choice, one that hurts either way. Keep holding on to someone who never chose you, or finally let go, even though part of you still wishes she would. Because the hardest thing about loving someone who doesn't feel the same way isn't losing them, it's accepting that you were never really theirs to begin with. At first, letting go doesn't feel like strength, it feels like defeat, like you're walking away from something that could have worked. If only things were slightly different. If only she saw you the way you saw her. If only she realized how much you cared. If only timing was better. If only you had said the right thing at the right moment. Your mind keeps replaying those what ifs over and over again, because your heart would rather believe in a small chance than accept a painful truth. But eventually something starts to shift inside you. Not dramatically, not overnight, just slowly. You start noticing how tired you are. Tired of hoping, tired of waiting, tired of checking your phone for a message that may or may not come. Tired of feeling like your happiness depends on someone else's attention. And that's when a different kind of realization hits you, one that hurts, but also frees you. You didn't lose her because you never had her. What you lost was the version of her you created in your mind, the version that loved you back, the version that chose you, the version that saw your worth the same way you saw hers. But that version never actually existed. It was just hope, and hope can be beautiful, but when it's built on the wrong person, it slowly becomes something painful. You start seeing things more clearly, how much effort you gave, how much patience you showed, how much of yourself you poured into someone who never asked for it. And instead of feeling embarrassed about that, you begin to understand something important. There's nothing wrong with loving deeply. There's nothing wrong with caring. There's nothing wrong with believing in someone. The only mistake is giving all of that to someone who was never willing to meet you halfway. And the truth is, one day you're going to meet someone who does. Someone who doesn't make you question where you stand. Someone who doesn't make you guess how they feel. Someone who doesn't make you feel like loving them is a risk. Because when someone truly wants you, you won't have to convince them. You won't have to compete for their attention. You won't have to sit there wondering if you're enough. They'll show you clearly, consistently, without confusion. And when that happens, you'll look back at this version of yourself. The one who stayed too long, the one who hoped too hard, the one who loved someone who couldn't love him back. And instead of feeling regret, you'll feel something else. Gratitude. Because that experience didn't break you, it taught you. It taught you what love shouldn't feel like. And most importantly, it taught you that the right person will never leave you wondering why they don't feel the same way. Because when someone truly loves you, you'll never have to ask that question again. This one is going to be uncomfortable. Not because I'm going to be cruel about it. Not because I think you're a bad person or that you deserve to hurt more than you already do. But because I think you've been telling yourself a story about what happened. A very comfortable, very sympathetic, very well-constructed story. And I think that story is costing you more than the heartbreak itself. And I'd rather say the hard thing than watch you carry a version of events that keeps you stuck. So, here it is. Some of what happened was your fault. Not all of it, maybe not even most of it, but some of it. A real, significant, honest sum. And you know that. Somewhere underneath the narrative you've been running, underneath the anger and the grief and the very reasonable pain, you know that you had a hand in this. You know there were things you did or didn't do, patterns you ran, moments where you chose the comfortable thing over the right thing, and that those choices contributed to the ending. And instead of sitting with that, you've been covering it, building a story around the parts that make you the injured party, collecting evidence for the version where this was done to you, not participated in by you. I understand why. I really do. Grief is hard enough without also having to hold accountability for it. When something ends and it hurts this much, the last thing you want to do is look at your own role in the wreckage. But the coping, the stories, the justifications, the careful editing of memory, that's not protecting you. That's just delaying the thing that would actually help. Let me tell you what the coping sounds like. Because I think a lot of us do this without fully recognizing it as what it is. It sounds like they were emotionally unavailable, which may be true, but it doesn't ask the question of why you stayed with someone emotionally unavailable for as long as you did. It doesn't ask what that unavailability was doing for you, whether it let you stay at a safe distance too, whether it meant you never had to be feely seen, whether their unavailability was, on some level, a feature rather than a bug. It sounds like they didn't appreciate me, which may also be true, but it doesn't ask whether you made yourself easy to appreciate, whether you communicated what you needed clearly, whether you showed up as the full version of yourself or a managed, careful version designed to be likable, whether you were actually present in the relationship or just there. It sounds like I gave everything and got nothing back. And I want to be careful here because sometimes this is just true, full stop, and you really were in something that took without returning. But sometimes, I gave everything as covering for something else. Sometimes giving everything is a way of controlling the dynamic. Sometimes the constant giving is designed unconsciously to put the other person in debt, to make leaving harder for them, to build a case in advance for why you're the good one if this falls apart. Giving can be generous. Giving can also be a strategy, and only you know which one it was. It sounds like they changed, but people don't usually change in a vacuum. Relationships change people. Your behavior in the relationship changes people. The environment you two created together changes both of you. When someone becomes distant or cold or checked out, it's worth asking, genuinely, honestly asking, what the environment was like. What was it like to be with you when things were hard? What they were responding to. I'm not saying it was your fault they changed. I'm saying change doesn't happen in isolation, and the story that casts you as the passive witness to someone else's transformation is probably missing some of your own. Here's the thing about the comfortable story. The one where you're the one who tried and they're the one who failed. The the one where the ending is their fault and your pain is entirely undeserved and there's nothing to examine on your end. That story feels better in the short term. Of course it does. It protects you from the really uncomfortable work of looking at yourself clearly. It lets you stay in the grief without having to complicate it with accountability. It lets you be sad without also having to be honest. But it has a cost, a specific, measurable cost. The cost is that you take nothing from this into the next thing. You exit this relationship with the same patterns, the same blind spots, the same tendencies that contributed to the ending. Because you never looked at them, you never identified them, you never held them up to the light and said, this is a me thing, this is something I do, this needs to change, and then you do it again. Different person, same dynamic, different face on the same shape of relationship, and it ends the same way. And you tell the same story again, and the story protects you again, and you take nothing again. That loop is why some people go their entire lives in relationships that follow the same pattern and never understand why. Not because they're unlucky, because they're very good at being the protagonist of a story that never asks them to grow. I want to be specific about some of the things we do, the actual behaviors, because I think naming them is more useful than speaking in abstractions. We go cold when we should go honest. Something bothers us and something real and something worth addressing, and instead of saying it clearly, we pull back. We get quieter. We create distance. We let the temperature in the room drop and wait for the other person to notice and ask. And when they don't ask, or when they ask wrong or not enough or in the wrong tone, we take that as evidence that they don't care. When really what happened is we asked them to read our minds and they failed a test they didn't know they were taking. We punish in small ways. We're less warm after a fight. We remember and bring it up later. We keep score and then act like we're not keeping score. We do the thing where we say, I'm fine, while very clearly not being fine, and then resent them for believing us. We pick the wrong moments to be honest and then wonder why honesty doesn't go well. We drop something heavy right when they're stressed or exhausted or in the middle of something. And when the conversation doesn't go the way we needed, we add it to the list of evidence that they can't handle us, that they don't prioritize our feelings, that they're not equipped for this relationship. We confuse intimacy with intensity. We think fighting means we care. We think drama means depth. We manufacture urgency in relationships that are actually healthy and stable because health and stability feel boring, feel unfamiliar, feel like the absence of passion rather than the presence of something real. We love loudly in the beginning and quietly disappear as it gets more real. We're incredibly present and attentive in the early phase, and then once we feel secure, we coast. We stop putting in the effort that got us here because we think arrival means the work is done. It doesn't. Arrival is when the work starts. We make the other person responsible for our emotional state. When we're happy, it's because of them, and we tell them so. But when we're anxious or insecure or struggling, that's also because of them. Their behavior, their distance, something they did or didn't do. We make them the weather of our inner life and then resent them for not always being sunny. We leave before we leave. We check out emotionally while still physically present. We stop investing in the thing months before it technically ends, and then when it ends, we act like we were fully in it right up to the last moment. We weren't. We'd already started protecting ourselves from a loss we were quietly engineering. Any of that land. Here's what I think is actually underneath the coping, because I don't think it's dishonesty. Exactly. I don't think most people sit down and consciously decide to distort what happened. I think it's fear. Specifically the fear that if you look at your role clearly, if you actually account for your part of the wreckage, you'll find something unfixable, something fundamentally wrong with you, some evidence that you are, at your core, the kind of person who ruins things, who doesn't know how to love correctly, who is too much or not enough or broken in some way that won't yield to effort. That's the fear underneath the story. The story protects you from having to find out if that fear is true. But here's what I want you to hear. Actually hear it. Looking at your part in something doesn't mean confirming your worst fears about yourself. It just means looking at behaviors, patterns, choices, things you did in specific moments for specific reasons that you can understand and, if you choose to, change. You are not your worst moments in a relationship. You are also not separate from them. They're data. They tell you something about where you were, what you needed, how you were operating, and that information is genuinely useful if you let yourself have it. The fear says if I look honestly, I'll find out I'm irredeemable. The truth is, if you look honestly, you'll find out you're human, imperfect and patterned, and sometimes self-protective in ways that hurt other people, just like every person who has ever been in a relationship. That's not a verdict, that's a starting point. Let me talk about what accountability actually looks like, because I think people avoid it partly because they imagine it as this punishing, self-flagellating thing, like looking honestly at yourself means spending months in a shame spiral, rehashing everything you did wrong, deciding you're terrible. That's not accountability, that's just shame with better lighting. Real accountability is quieter than that. It looks more like sitting down at some point when the sharpest grief has passed and asking yourself some honest questions, not rhetorical ones designed to confirm a narrative, actual ones. What did I do in this relationship that I wouldn't want someone to do to me? Not the obvious stuff, not the big fights or the bad days. The small, consistent stuff. The daily texture of how I showed up. What did I know was wrong and keep doing anyway? What did I avoid saying because saying it would have required me to change something I wasn't ready to change? Where was I unfair? Not just in the moments I already know about, the ones I've been editing out of the version I tell people. What did this person need from me that I wasn't willing to give? And was it actually something I couldn't give, or just something I chose not to? Those questions are hard. They're supposed to be hard, but they're also genuinely useful in a way that no amount of righteous anger about what they did to you ever will be, because the answers to those questions travel with you. They're portable. They go into the next relationship and make you better at it. They turn heartbreak into something that costs you once instead of costing you every time. There's one more thing I want to name before we get to the other side of this, and it's the one that's hardest to say because it implicates something we don't like to look at. Sometimes the coping isn't just about protecting yourself from accountability. Sometimes it's about protecting your image of yourself as a good person, as someone who loves well, as someone who, when relationships end, can look back and genuinely say, I tried, I was present, I gave it everything. That image matters to a lot of us, more than we admit. We want to be the person who loved honestly and got hurt anyway, not the person who contributed to their own heartbreak through avoidable choices. We want to be the protagonist of a love story, not the cautionary tale. And so we protect the image. We curate the memory. We tell the story to friends in a way that quietly omits the parts where we weren't our best selves. And slowly, through repetition, we start to believe the curated version. It becomes the real one. The messy, complicated actual version gets buried under the one that makes us look okay. But you can't grow from a version of yourself that you've cleaned up for public consumption. You grow from the real one, the one that includes the moments you're not proud of, the one that captures not just what happened, but how you made people feel, the one that honestly accounts for what you brought into the room. The insecurity, the patterns, the defense mechanisms, the ways you protected yourself that accidentally hurt someone else. And that version isn't shameful, it's just true. And truth is the only thing you can actually work with. I want to say something about the grief, because I don't want this to feel like I'm dismissing it. Your pain is real. Whatever happened, however complicated your role in it, the loss is real and the hurt is real, and you are allowed to feel all of it without having to earn it through perfect behavior. You don't have to have been blameless to deserve to grieve. The grief and the accountability can exist at the same time. In fact, I think that's the only way to actually heal from something like this, not choosing between feeling it and examining it, but doing both. Letting yourself hurt fully while also slowly, with compassion for yourself, looking at what's yours to own. Because the coping and the comfortable story, the edited version, it doesn't actually protect you from the pain. It just reroutes it. You still feel it, you still carry it. You just carry it alongside a story that keeps you from understanding it. And understanding it is what lets you put it down eventually. Not the story, the actual thing. The real account of what happened, your role in theirs, what was real and what was projected, what was love and what was fear wearing love's clothes. That understanding is the only version of this that leads somewhere. The story just leads back to the same place. So stop coping. Or start slowly to stop, not all at once, not by burning down every comforting thing you've been telling yourself in the one brutal session of self-examination. That's not useful either. Just start making room. Start allowing the possibility that the story you've been telling isn't the whole story. Start letting the questions in, not to punish yourself, but because you are curious about yourself, and you deserve to know yourself accurately. Start being as honest with yourself about your own behavior as you are about theirs. Because here's what's true. The heartbreak you're carrying right now and the real weight of it, the part that won't quite heal, I don't think it's only about them. I think some of it is about you. About things you did that you wish you'd done differently. About the person you were in this relationship that you don't fully want to be. You know that. You've known it. You've just been covering it with everything else because sitting with it is hard and sitting with it feels like losing. But it's not losing, it's the beginning of actually getting somewhere. The pain doesn't go away when you stop coping, but it changes shape. It becomes something you can hold and look at and learn from instead of something that just lives in you without meaning. And meaning is the only thing that makes any of this worth what it cost. You already paid. You might as well take what you bought. There's a moment after a relationship ends that nobody really prepares you for. It's not the breakup itself. It's what happens after. When everything gets quiet. That's when your mind starts doing something you can't seem to stop. You replay it. The conversations, the moments, the little details that didn't seem important at the time. Your brain starts going back through everything like it's searching for something you missed. You think about the way they said certain things, the tone in their voice during that one argument, the night things felt slightly different but you couldn't explain why. And suddenly those memories feel heavier than they did before, because now you're looking at them with the one thing you didn't have back then, the ending. So your mind keeps asking questions. Was that the moment things started going wrong? Was that when they stopped feeling the same way? Was there something I could have said differently? Something I could have done better? And the worst part is you never get answers. So instead, your brain keeps replaying the same scenes over and over again. Like if you analyze it enough times, you'll finally find the explanation that makes everything make sense. But it never really works that way. Because breakups don't usually come from one single moment. They come from 1,000 small things building up quietly over time. Still, that doesn't stop your mind from trying, late at night especially. When the distractions are gone, when your phone isn't buzzing, when the room is dark, when it's just you and your thoughts. That's when the memories get the loudest. You remember the good moments first, the way they used to laugh, the way they looked at you when things were still easy, the little routines you built together without even realizing it. And for a second, it almost feels like they're still there. Then reality comes back, and your mind jumps to the next question. What did I do wrong? Because when someone you loved walks away, it's almost impossible not to assume that somewhere along the way, you messed it up. So you go back through everything again, trying to find the exact moment where things could have been saved. But the truth is, the more you replay it in your head, the more trapped you start to feel in something that already ended. And that's the part nobody talks about. Sometimes the relationship doesn't end when the person leaves. Sometimes it ends weeks later, when you finally stop reliving it. The strange thing about replaying a relationship in your head is that your mind doesn't show you the whole story. It shows you selected scenes, little moments that suddenly feel way more important than they did at the time. You remember the last conversation you had with them. Every word, every pause, every sentence you wish you could take back. You start thinking about what would have happened if you just said something different. Maybe if you had stayed calmer. Maybe if you didn't bring up that one thing. Maybe if you gave them more space. Your brain turns it into this giant what-if loop. What if I did this differently? What if I handled that moment better? What if I noticed the signs earlier? And slowly, without even realizing it, you start rewriting the past in your head. You create these alternate versions of the relationship where everything works out. In those versions, you say the perfect thing. You catch the problems early, you fix the issues before they grow. And in those imaginary timelines, they stay. But reality doesn't work like that. The real relationship didn't have the benefit of hindsight. It was messy. It had misunderstandings. Moments where both of you were tired. Conversations that didn't go the way either of you wanted. And the truth is, two people can genuinely care about each other and still not be able to make it work. But your brain doesn't like accepting that, because accepting that means admitting something painful. Sometimes there wasn't a single moment you could have fixed. Sometimes the ending wasn't about one mistake. It was about two people who just couldn't meet each other where they needed to. Still, your mind keeps searching, because if you can find the moment where everything went wrong, it gives you the illusion that you had control, that maybe you could have prevented the ending. but deep down you already know something that's hard to accept. If someone was truly meant to stay, the relationship wouldn't collapse because of one imperfect conversation. Love that lasts doesn't disappear over one moment. And when you finally start realizing that, something shifts. The memories don't disappear overnight. You'll still think about them sometimes. But slowly, you stop treating every memory like a clue in a mystery you need to solve. Because some stories don't need to be solved. They just need to be closed. The hardest part about replaying everything in your head is that you think you're searching for closure. But most of the time, you're actually just reopening the wound. Every time you revisit the memories, you're putting yourself back in those moments again. Back in the conversations, back in the arguments, back in the days when things started feeling different, and your brain keeps asking the same question. Why? Why did they stop loving me? Why did things change? Why wasn't I enough for them to stay? But here's the thing about closure. A lot of people think closure comes from the other person explaining everything perfectly. They imagine one final conversation where the other person sits down and says exactly what happened, exactly why things ended, and somehow that explanation makes the pain disappear. But real life rarely works like that. Most endings don't come with perfect explanations. Sometimes people don't even fully understand their own reasons. Sometimes they just feel something change inside them. And that's a terrifying thing to accept. Because if love can change without a clear explanation, then it means there wasn't necessarily a moment you could have prevented. And that's what your mind is trying to fight against. Your mind keeps replaying everything because it wants control. It wants to believe there was a specific moment where the outcome could have been different. But the truth that hurts the most is this. Not every ending is caused by a mistake. Sometimes two people just reach a point where they can't continue together. Not because one of them failed, not because one of them wasn't good enough, but because the relationship itself couldn't keep going. And once that happens, no amount of replaying the past will change it. No amount of analyzing old conversations will bring the person back. All it does is keep you emotionally tied to something that already ended. That's why healing doesn't start when the breakup happens. Healing starts when you stop trying to solve the past. When you finally allow yourself to accept something difficult, the relationship is over. And even though your mind keeps pulling you back into those memories, your life is still moving forward. Whether you're ready for it or not, at some point you start noticing something. The memories aren't hurting you the same way they used to. Not because they disappeared, but because you finally stopped treating them like something you need to fix. For a long time, your mind kept going back to the same moments. The last argument, the last message, the last time you saw them. Like if you could just understand it perfectly, the pain would finally make sense. But eventually you realized something important. You weren't replaying it because the answer was still there. You were replaying it because letting go felt like losing them all over again. So part of you held on, not to the relationship itself, but to the idea that maybe you could still figure it out. Maybe if you understood what went wrong, it would somehow undo the ending. But life doesn't give us that kind of control. Some people enter your life, change you in ways you didn't expect, and then they leave. And you don't always get a clean explanation. You don't always get a moment where everything makes sense. Sometimes all you get is time to slowly accept that the story already reached its ending. And when you finally stop replaying it in your head, you start noticing something else. Your life didn't end with that relationship. There are still new people you haven't met. New memories you haven't made. New moments waiting for you that have nothing to do with the past you've been stuck in. Because the truth is, you were never meant to spend the rest of your life trapped in old conversations or wondering about the words you wish you said differently. You were meant to keep living, and one day, without even realizing when it happened, you'll think about them again. But this time it won't feel like a wound. It'll just feel like a chapter of your life that already ended. And you'll finally understand something that once felt impossible. The past only has power over you, as long as you keep replaying it. What if everything was okay? I want you to sit with that question for a second before we go anywhere. Not as a rhetorical thing, not as the opening move of a piece that's about to tell you why everything actually isn't okay and here's what you should do about it. Just as an actual question, a real one. What if everything was okay? What if the text meant nothing? What if the quiet was just quiet? What if the distance you've been feeling was just life being life, and not a signal that something is ending or unraveling or quietly moving away from you? What if the job was actually fine, the relationship was actually fine, The version of yourself you've been worrying about was actually closer to fine than the version your brain has been showing you at 2 a.m. What if you've been living a problem that doesn't exist? I know how that sounds. I know some of you are reading that and thinking, but the problem is real. The thing I'm worried about is real. I'm not making this up. And you might be right. Some of what you're carrying is real. I'm not dismissing that. But I want to ask the question anyway, because I think for a lot of us, more of us than we'd like to admit, the answer to what if everything was okay is something we haven't let ourselves fully consider. Something that feels almost dangerous to believe. Because if everything is okay, then all the energy we've spent managing the ways it isn't was wasted. And if it was wasted, what does that say about how we've been living? That's the question underneath the question. And it's worth sitting with. Let me start with why okay is so hard to trust. Because I don't think the difficulty is random. I don't think you distrust okay because you're irrational or neurotic or constitutionally incapable of peace. I think you distrust okay because okay has been taken away from you before. In specific moments with specific people, and circumstances that started as fine and turned into something else without sufficient warning. You were okay once and then you weren't. And the transition happened fast enough or without enough signal that your nervous system made a note. The note said, okay is temporary. Okay is the thing that exists right before something changes. Okay is not a stable state, it's a phase, a corridor, a brief pause between the last hard thing and the next one. And so you stopped being able to fully inhabit okay. Because inhabiting it fully means trusting it. And trusting it means being exposed when it ends. And being exposed when it ends, being surprised by the loss, being caught without your guard up, being genuinely blindsided by something you could have been preparing for. That has happened before and the cost was significant. So you stay slightly ahead of okay. You scan the horizon, you monitor for the thing that's going to end the good period. Because if you can see it coming, you can be ready. And being ready is the closest thing to safe that your nervous system knows how to do. That's not a flaw. That's a perfectly rational adaptation to a history that trains you to expect disruption. The problem is that the adaptation is now running in environments that don't require it. In relationships and circumstances that are actually stable. In moments of genuine okay that you are moving through without being able to feel them because the monitoring never stops. Here's what living outside of okay actually looks like. The daily texture of it. Because I think when it's named specifically, the recognition is useful. It looks like being 3 conversations ahead. The thing being said right now is barely registering, because you're already running the implications, already following the thread to its possible ends, already preparing responses to versions of this conversation that haven't happened. And the person talking to you, the actual person, in this actual moment, is getting a version of presence that is actually absence dressed up as listening. It looks like waiting for the other shoe to drop inside good things. The relationship is going well. And somewhere in you, there's a quiet countdown. The job is stable, and part of you is already practicing what it would feel like if it wasn't. The friendship is real and warm, and you're enjoying it with one eye on the exit, because people leave, and you've learned not to be surprised when they do. You're enjoying things with a built-in distance, a slight remove, a refusal to fully arrive because fully arrive is what you do right before you get hurt. It looks like being unable to receive good things cleanly. A compliment arrives, and something in you immediately starts auditing it. Is it true? What did they want? Why are they saying this now? The compliment is real. You can probably tell it's real, but your brain has developed a processing step between receiving and believing that almost nothing gets through cleanly. You're filtering the good stuff. You've built infrastructure specifically designed to make the good stuff less able to reach you. And it looks like exhaustion that doesn't make sense on paper. Your life from the outside is fine. Nothing catastrophic is happening. You're managing. But you're tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix because you've been working overtime on threat detection. It hasn't found a real threat in a while and doesn't know how to stand down. I want to talk about what you're missing while you're not in okay. Not in an accusatory way, not in a you're wasting your life way, just the specific things that are happening in the present tense that you're not fully experiencing because part of your attention is elsewhere. You're missing the ease of the people who love you, the specific quality of being with someone who is genuinely glad you're there. Not performing gladness, not being polite, but actually lit up by your presence in a way that doesn't require anything from you except to just be there. That quality is available to you in relationships you already have, and you're experiencing it at about 60% because 40% of you is monitoring whether it's going to last. You're missing your own good moments, the times when something funny happens and you laugh, really laugh, the involuntary kind. And for a second you're completely in it. And then the brain catches up and starts analyzing what the laughter means and whether it's appropriate and what comes next, and the moment is gone before you even registered having it. You've been having your experiences slightly after the fact, processing them as they pass rather than inhabiting them as they happen. You're missing the specific piece of a Tuesday that is just a Tuesday, not building toward anything, not the calm before something, just a day that is what it is, the coffee in the morning, the particular quality of afternoon light, The conversation that doesn't go anywhere important and doesn't need to. The completely ordinary hours that make up most of a life and that you've been moving through like a waiting room instead of like the actual content of being alive. Those things are your life, not the milestone moments, not the dramatic events, not the things worth reporting when someone asks how you've been. The Tuesdays. The ordinary good things that don't make the highlight reel but constitute most of the hours. You've been in those hours. You've just not been fully present for them. Here's a question I want to ask, and I want you to actually think about it rather than answering reflexively. What would you have to give up if everything was okay? Because I don't think the resistance to okay is purely unconscious. I think there are specific things that the not okay serves. And until those things are named, the okay is going to keep being hard to access. Some people would have to give up their explanation. The story of why things aren't working, why they haven't arrived where they wanted to be, why the relationships keep going the way they go. The not okay is doing real narrative work. It explains the gap between where you are and where you thought you'd be. If everything was okay, the gap would have to be explained some other way, and the other way might require looking at choices rather than circumstances. That's a harder look. Some people would have to give up their vigilance, the monitoring, the scanning, the constant low-grade preparedness for things going wrong. And the vigilance, while exhausting, is also a kind of purpose, a job. It gives you something to do with the part of you that can't be still. If everything was okay, that part would have to find somewhere else to go. And somewhere else feels like nowhere. Some people would have to give up their identity as someone who is going through something. The person in the hard season has a specific kind of meaning attached to their struggle. People check on you. You have something real to work through. Your life has a kind of weight to it that disappears if everything is okay. And the absence of weight, the lightness of things actually being fine, can feel strangely like loss, like you've been demoted from something significant to something ordinary. None of that is shameful. All of it is human. But it's worth naming, because the okay is going to keep feeling threatening until you understand what its arrival would cost. I want to say something about the relationship between okay and love, because I think this is where the distrust of okay does the most quiet damage. Love, real love, exists mostly in the okay moments, not in the dramatic ones, not in the fights and the reconciliations and the intensity and the moments of crisis that bring people back to each other. Those moments are real and they have their own meaning, but they're not where love actually lives day to day. Love lives in the Tuesday morning, in the way someone hands you something without being asked, in the conversation that goes nowhere in particular but leaves you feeling known, in the specific comfort of being in a room with someone and not needing the room to be anything other than what it is. Those moments are okay moments, quiet, ordinary, unremarkable. And if you can't trust okay, if you're always monitoring from a slight distance, always waiting for the texture to change, you're moving through the place where love actually lives without being able to feel it. You're loving people from behind glass. The warmth is real, the connection is real, but you're not quite in contact with it, and the person loving you back can feel that, not as something you're doing wrong, as a distance that can't quite close, as a reaching that never quite lands. And they keep trying. The good ones keep trying. But at some point, being unable to reach someone who is physically present becomes its own kind of lonely. You're not protecting them from your uncertainty. You're keeping them from the version of you that could actually be reached. Let me say something about the version of you that exists when you're actually in okay. The one that doesn't have to be managed into being, that just shows up when the monitoring goes quiet long enough. That version is lighter. Not in a way that lacks depth, in a way that isn't carrying extra weight. It moves through rooms differently. It's more present in conversations because it isn't running parallel processing on what the conversation might mean. It laughs more freely because it isn't checking whether the laughter is appropriate. It reaches for people more naturally because it isn't first assessing the risk of the reaching. You've been that version before. In the moments when the vigilance broke down not because you decided to let it, but because something pulled you fully into the present before the monitoring could catch up. A piece of music. A really good conversation. A sunset that arrived at exactly the right moment. A laugh that was too genuine to be managed. In those moments, you were in your life. Fully, completely, without the remove. And then the moment passed and the monitoring resumed and you went back to the slight distance. But the version of you that existed in those moments, present, unguarded, actually here, that's not a special occasion version. That's the version that's available more broadly if the conditions for it are created more intentionally. If the monitoring is given permission to stand down not just when something pulls you in, but as a practice. A daily, ongoing, imperfect practice of choosing to be in the thing you're actually in. That version is you. More fundamentally you than the vigilant one. The vigilant one was built for a specific purpose. The present one is who you were before the purpose arrived. So what does it look like to let everything be okay? Not as a permanent state, not as a denial of real things that are hard, but as a practice. A daily choice to be where things actually are instead of where your brain has already moved to. It starts with the body. Because okay doesn't arrive as a thought first. It arrives as a physical state, and the body that has been in low-grade threat mode for a long time has forgotten what the alternative feels like, so you start there, in the physical sensation of a moment that doesn't require anything from you. The breath that's slower than it needs to be, the shoulders that drop, the specific quality of a body that is not currently in danger and is being allowed to know that. That experience is available more often than you've been accessing it. Not always. Real life has real difficulty, but in the ordinary moments, in the Tuesday morning, in the conversation with someone who is genuinely glad you're there, it's available. And it requires something from you. It requires you to put down the monitoring long enough to be in the moment you're actually in, not permanently. Just for this moment, this specific current actual moment that is not requiring anything except your presence in it. And then the next one, and then the one after that. Because that's what okay is, when you let it be what it is. Not a destination, not a phase before something harder, not something that will be taken away if you trust it too fully. Just a series of moments that don't require you to be anywhere other than in them. The past that hurts you is real, the future that might be hard is possible, but neither of them is here right now. What's here right now is just this, just okay. What if everything was okay? I think for a lot of you the answer is, it might be. More often than you're allowing yourself to experience it, more of the time than the monitoring has been willing to admit, in more of your relationships and more of your ordinary days, and more of the hours you've been moving through from a slight remove. The okay is there. It's been there. You've been in it while not quite being in it. You're allowed to be in it. Not as a denial of what's been hard. Not as a pretense that life doesn't have difficulty. Just as an honest accounting of what this moment actually is. And this moment right now as you read this is probably closer to okay than the part of you that never stops scanning is willing to admit. Let it be okay. Not forever. Not unconditionally. Just right now. Just this moment. That's all okay ever asks. Just this one. And then the next. And then the one after that, that's how you come back to your own life. One moment at a time, choosing to be in the one you're actually in. I want to be clear about something up front. This isn't a sad story. Or, it is, in parts. But it's not the kind where I'm sitting in a dim room telling you about all the ways love failed me, and how I gave up. That's not what this is. That's not why I'm here. I am here because I made a choice. An actual, deliberate, eyes-open choice. And I think that choice is one of the more honest things I've ever done for myself. And I also think most people won't understand it until they've been where I've been. So let me try to explain it. The first thing you need to know is that I wasn't always like this. There was a version of me, not that long ago honestly, who was completely all in on the whole thing. The relationship, the partnership, the building a life with someone project. I believed in it. Not in a naive way, not in a Disney movie way, but in the way a person believes in something they've thought seriously about and decided is worth pursuing. I wanted the person who knew my coffee order without asking. I wanted someone to text when something small but funny happened. I wanted the Sunday mornings and the inside jokes and the specific kind of comfort that only comes from being truly known by another person over time. I wanted all of it, genuinely, for years, and I went looking for it. Over and over again with real effort, real openness, real willingness to be vulnerable and present, and all the things the books and the podcasts tell you to be, and I kept coming back empty. Not devastated, just empty. Like I'd gone to the well expecting water and found it dry again, and had to walk back the same long road carrying nothing. After enough trips, I stopped going to the well. That's not giving up, that's pattern recognition. Here's what the pattern looked like, because I think this part matters. Every relationship I was in, or almost in, or orbiting around, had the same shape to it. Not the same people, not the same details, but the same underlying geometry. I would show up fully. That was just how I did it. I don't know how to be half in something. Never learned. When I was there, I was completely there, present, invested, paying attention, caring about the small stuff, because the small stuff is where people actually live, and for a while that energy would get matched. The beginning always felt mutual. There was something real there. I wasn't imagining it. The connection was genuine. The warmth was genuine. The feeling that this might actually be the thing was genuine. And then, slowly, something would shift. Not a dramatic shift. Not a fight or a betrayal or a definitive turning point. Just a gradual, almost imperceptible drift toward a symmetry, where I was still all the way in, and they had quietly moved to something closer to halfway. And I would notice it and not say anything because I didn't want to be the person who was keeping score. And I would adjust my expectations down a little, and I would fill in the gaps with generous interpretations, and I would keep going until I couldn't. and then it would end. Either because I finally said something, or they finally left, or it just quietly died from the weight of its own imbalance. And I would be the one sitting with the full grief of it while they seemed, from the outside, at least, more or less fine. That happened enough times that I had to ask myself a serious question. Is this bad luck? Or is this me? And the answer, the honest one, the one I had to sit with for a long time before I could say it clearly, was both. Some of it was bad luck. Some of it was timing, incompatibility, the simple fact that most relationships don't work out, and that's not a reflection of anyone's worth. But some of it was me, specifically a version of me that I had been dragging into every relationship without fully examining it. I was choosing people who needed to be convinced, not in a dramatic way, not people who were cruel or checked out completely, but people who were, at their core, slightly ambivalent. People who were kind of available, sort of interested, generally positive, but never quite fully choosing me. People for whom I was a good option, but not the obvious one. And I kept choosing them because I confused the work of convincing someone with the feeling of earning something. Like if I had to work for it, it must be worth something. Like if it came easily, it probably wasn't real. That's a broken piece of logic, and I ran it for years. The love I was chasing was the love that felt like proof. Proof that I was worth the effort. Proof that someone who wasn't sure could become sure because of me, because of what I brought, because of who I was when I was fully present. What I actually found every time was people who remained a little unsure, and me, exhausted from the convincing, wondering why it still felt like I was auditioning. You cannot love someone into certainty. I know that now. Certainty about a person is something you either have or you don't. It's not something that gets built through accumulated evidence. But I didn't know it then. I kept trying to build it, and I kept being surprised when the foundation didn't hold. So I stopped. Not dramatically, no announcement, no declaration. I just stopped putting myself in situations that I already knew the shape of. Stopped swiping. Stopped accepting the half invitations from people who were interested in theory, but not in practice. Stopped extending myself toward things I could already tell weren't going to hold. And the first thing I noticed was how much energy I got back. That sounds almost embarrassingly simple, but it's real. The amount of mental and emotional bandwidth that I had been pouring into other people, into decoding their behavior, into managing my own hope, into the constant quiet work of being in something that wasn't quite working. That bandwidth suddenly had nowhere to go, and it came back to me. It's the strangest feeling. Suddenly having access to your own full attention. Suddenly being the primary recipient of your own care. I'd been so focused outward for so long that being focused inward felt almost disorienting at first. Like, what do I actually like? Not what do I like doing with someone else? What do I like alone, for no reason except that it's good for me? I had to relearn that, which is a little embarrassing to admit, but it's true. I want to be careful here, because I think there's a version of this story that slides into something self-congratulatory. Like, I chose myself, I learned to love being alone, now everything is better and I don't need anyone. That's not what I'm saying. That version is a little too clean, and I don't trust it. The truth is, being alone is hard in ways that being in a bad relationship is not. Being in a bad relationship is its own kind of hard. The grief of it, the confusion of it, the way it chips at you, I'm not romanticizing that. But there's a version of the suffering in a relationship that at least has company. You're not okay, but you're not okay with someone. There's another person in the room. Being alone means being not okay by yourself. It means the hard nights are genuinely quiet. It means there's no one to reach for when you wake up and the world feels like too much. It means birthdays and holidays and Sunday afternoons that can feel very wide and very empty if you let them. I feel that. I'm not pretending I don't, but here's the difference. When I was in those half relationships, those asymmetrical things, I felt alone anyway. I felt alone while texting someone. I felt alone at dinner with someone. I felt alone in the middle of a conversation with someone who was technically present but not really there. I felt alone in the specific, suffocating way that only happens when you're with another person who isn't meeting you. That kind of alone is worse than the real kind, because the real kind is honest. It doesn't pretend to be something it isn't. It doesn't make you question yourself. It doesn't ask you to keep pouring into it while it gives you just enough warmth to stay. Alone is just quiet. And quiet I can work with. There's something that started happening after a few months of this that I didn't expect. I started liking myself more. Not in a self-help affirmation way, in a specific practical way. I started noticing things about myself that I genuinely liked, qualities that had always been there, but that I'd been spending so much energy managing in the context of other people that I hadn't fully felt them. My ability to sit with hard things without needing to immediately fix them, the way I think about problems, the strange, specific humor that only really comes out when I'm comfortable. The things I care about that I used to soften or shrink because I wasn't sure they'd land with whoever I was trying to impress. Those things don't need to be approved of when there's no one to approve them. They just are. They're just mine. And I realized, and this is the part that hit me harder than I expected, I realized that for years I had been trying to get other people to validate things about me that I hadn't validated for myself yet. I was looking for them to confirm that I was worth loving before I'd really decided that for myself. That's not a thing another person can do for you. I see that clearly now. You can be loved by a dozen people and still feel worthless if you haven't done the internal work. Love from the outside doesn't fill the inside. It just temporarily covers the gap. I had to do that work, and I could not do it while I was constantly looking outward. Let me tell you about a specific night that I think about sometimes. It was a Saturday, about 4 months into doing this thing deliberately. And I had nothing going on, no plans, no one to meet, no one to check in with. Just a whole evening by myself. A few months earlier, that would have felt like failure, like evidence of something wrong with my life. I would have spent half of it anxious, texting people, trying to manufacture some company, telling myself I was fine while quietly being not fine at all. That night I made dinner, took longer than I needed to, listened to music I liked at a volume I liked, ate at my own table in my own time without checking my phone, watched something I'd been meaning to watch for a long time, went to bed when I was actually tired, not because there was nothing else to do. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, I realized I was happy. Not in an event way, not because something good had happened, just quietly, steadily happy, content actually, in a way that didn't require anything from anyone. That felt new, that felt important, because I think for most of my adult life, I had been treating happiness as a thing that required ingredients, people, plans, someone to share it with. And that night I discovered it could just be a state, a default, something you could arrive at by removing the things that were disrupting it rather than adding more things to try to create it. That was the night I really understood why I'd chosen this. I want to address the thing people say, because there are a few responses you get when you tell someone you're choosing to be alone, and most of them are well-meaning but not quite right. The first one is, you'll change your mind when you meet the right person. Maybe. I'm not ruling it out. I'm not taking a vow. But this statement assumes that the choice to be alone is a temporary state of waiting, like I'm just in a holding pattern until the right flight comes in. And that framing misses the whole point. I'm not waiting. I'm here. I'm actually fully here, in this life, right now. Not as a placeholder until something better comes along. The second one is you're scared of getting hurt. And look, yes, obviously, I'm a person. I've been hurt, and getting hurt is part of the record. But choosing to be alone isn't the same as choosing to be closed. I'm not building walls, I'm building a self that is solid enough that the next time I open up to someone, I'm doing it from a place of wholeness instead of a place of need. There's a difference between protecting yourself out of fear and protecting yourself out of self-respect. One closes everything down and the other just raises the standard. The third one, and this is the one that's hardest to explain, is, but don't you get lonely? Yes, sometimes, of course. But loneliness that comes from being alone is clean, it's honest. It points at a real thing, a real gap, a real human need. And I can sit with it, name it, feel it, and let it pass. That's survivable. That's just being human. The loneliness that comes from being in the wrong relationship and from being with someone and still feeling unseen, unchosen, like a guest in something that should feel like home, that loneliness has no clean edge. You can't point to it. You can't name it without sounding ungrateful. You can't let it pass because the source of it is still right there next to you. And every day you're in it, you're just adding more distance between yourself and the life you actually want. I'll take the honest loneliness every time. I've been thinking lately about what I actually want. Not as a performance of self-awareness, like the real list, the one I'd only tell myself. I want to feel chosen, really chosen. Not tolerated, not convenient, not the best available option for someone who's still looking over their shoulder. Chosen. The way you choose something when you thought about it clearly and you still want it. The way you choose something and then keep choosing it on the days when it's difficult. I want someone who wants to know me. Not the surface, not the job and the opinions and the easy conversation. The actual me. The specific, sometimes difficult, definitely imperfect actual person. I want it to feel mutual. I want to stop being the one who loves more, works more, stays more. I want to be in something that meets me somewhere in the middle and stays there. And I decided, and this is the core of all of this, I decided that I would rather wait for that thing than keep settling for the shapes of it. I would rather be here in my own life, fully present and genuinely okay, than be in something halfway good that slowly costs me myself. That's not lowering my expectations, it's raising them. It's saying it's this specific thing, this particular experience of being really seen and really chosen and really met. That's what I'm holding out for. Not perfection, not the absence of difficulty, just mutuality, just real. And until that's available, I'm here, I'm fine here. I'm more than fine. So that's why I chose to be alone. Not because love failed me, though it did sometimes. Not because I stopped believing in it, because I didn't. Not because I'm scared, though fear is part of everything. Because I finally got honest about what I was actually doing when I kept showing up for things that weren't working. I was filling a space, managing a loneliness, keeping myself busy with the project of someone else so I didn't have to sit with the quieter, harder project of myself. And the quieter, harder project turned out to be the important one. I know who I am now in a way I didn't before. I know what I need, I know what I'm willing to give and what I'm not willing to keep giving to things that take it without returning it. I know the difference between loving someone and needing them to make me feel like I'm okay. That knowledge didn't come from a relationship, it came from the absence of one. From enough quiet to actually hear myself. And when the right person comes, if they come, when they come, I'll be someone worth finding. Not someone still figuring out what they want. Not someone so hungry for connection that they'll take any version of it. Someone whole. Someone who wants it but doesn't need it to survive. Someone who chose themselves first and is now maybe ready to choose someone else. That's the version of this I want. That's what I've been building toward. And it started with choosing to be alone. Will I ever be loved? There's a question some people carry around that they never really say out loud. It doesn't come up in conversations. It's not something you ask your friends. And it's definitely not something you post online. But it sits quietly in the back of your mind. The question is simple. Will I ever be loved? Not liked. Not tolerated. Not someone people talk to when they're bored. Loved. The kind of love where someone chooses you. The kind where they stay. Because if you're being honest with yourself, you've probably watched it happen for everyone else. You see couples walking together. Friends getting engaged. People talking about their person like they're the most natural thing in the world. And part of you is happy for them. But another part of you can't help wondering, why has that never happened to me? You've tried before. You've talked to people. You've opened up. You've let yourself believe that maybe this time it could be different. And for a moment, it always feels promising. They laugh at your jokes. They text you first. They tell you they enjoy talking to you. And you start to think maybe this is finally it. Maybe this is the person who's going to stay. But then something always changes. The messages get shorter. The effort starts fading. The energy you once felt from them slowly disappears. Till one day you realize something that hurts more than anything. You cared way more than they did. And after that happens enough times, you stop asking what went wrong with the relationship. You start asking what's wrong with you. You look in the mirror and start picking yourself apart. Maybe I'm not attractive enough. Maybe I'm too quiet. Maybe I'm too emotional. Maybe I'm just not the type of person someone chooses. And the worst part about that feeling is that nobody around you sees it. To everyone else, you seem normal. You go to work. You talk to people. You laugh when you're supposed to. But inside, there's this quiet loneliness that never really leaves. Because wanting to be loved isn't some dramatic fantasy. It's one of the most human things there is. To have someone who looks at you and thinks, I want this person in my life. Not temporarily, not when it's convenient, but for real. And when you've spent years feeling like that hasn't happened for you yet, that's when the doubt starts creeping in. You start wondering if maybe some people are just meant to watch love happen for everyone else and never experience it themselves. After a while, the question doesn't just stay in the back of your mind. It starts showing up everywhere. You'll be scrolling through your phone and see someone you went to school with, posting pictures with their partner, smiling, laughing, looking like they found something real. And you pause for a second, not because you're jealous in a hateful way, but because you can't help thinking, how did they figure it out? How did they find someone who chose them? Because from where you're standing, it almost feels like everyone else received instructions for love that you never got. Some people fall into relationships so easily, they meet someone, they click, and suddenly they're building a life together. Meanwhile, you're still sitting there wondering why every connection you try seems to fade before it ever becomes something real. You replay old conversations in your head, moments where you thought things were going well, the way they used to respond quickly, the way they seemed interested in you, the way they said things that made you believe they actually cared, and then you remember the shift, that slow change where their energy started pulling away, the delayed replies, the canceled plans, the feeling that you were the only one trying to keep things alive, until eventually you stopped hearing from them altogether. And what hurts the most about those moments isn't just losing the person, it's realizing how easily they walked away. Like the connection that meant so much to you, it didn't really mean that much to them. That's the part that sticks with you. Because after enough of those experiences, something inside you starts changing. You become more cautious. You hesitate before getting excited about someone new. You stop letting yourself believe things too quickly. Not because you don't want love, but because disappointment starts feeling predictable. And eventually you find yourself doing something you never used to do before. You start preparing for people to leave. Even when someone new enters your life and things feel good, there's this quiet voice in the back of your mind saying, don't get too attached. It probably won't last. So instead of enjoying the moment, you hold part of yourself back. You protect your feelings. You stay guarded. And the strange thing about that kind of loneliness is that it doesn't always happen when you're physically alone. You can be surrounded by people, talking, laughing, living your life. But deep down, there's still this quiet uncertainty, because the question never really disappears. Late at night, when everything gets quiet, it comes back again. Will someone ever truly love me? Not temporarily, not out of convenience, but the kind of love where someone looks at you and decides you're worth staying for. And when you've spent years feeling like you're still waiting for that moment, it's hard not to start wondering if maybe it was never meant for you at all. The hardest part about carrying that question, will I ever be loved, is that eventually it stops sounding like a question. It starts sounding like an answer. After enough disappointments, enough people leaving, enough almost relationships that never become real, something inside you slowly shifts. You stop expecting love, not dramatically, not in some big moment where you say you're done with relationships forever. It's quieter than that. You just stop hoping the same way you used to. When you meet someone new, you don't let yourself imagine a future with them anymore. You don't let your mind wander into those what-if scenarios, because every time you did that in the past, it eventually ended the same way they left. So now you protect yourself. You convince yourself that you don't really need love like other people do. You focus on work, on hobbies, on building a life that doesn't rely on anyone staying. And on the outside, it actually starts to look like you're doing better. You're more independent. You don't chase people anymore. You don't beg for attention. You don't sit around waiting for someone to text you back. But what most people don't see is the quiet sadness that comes with that kind of independence. Because deep down, you never actually stop wanting love. You just stop believing it would happen. There's a difference, and that difference shows up in the smallest moments. Like when you're walking somewhere alone and you see a couple holding hands, or when your friends start talking about their relationships and the little things their partner does for them, or when you're lying in bed at night and the room is completely silent. That's when the thought slips back in again. What if it never happens for me? What if I'm one of those people who's always the friend, always the listener, always the one who's there for everyone else, but never the person someone chooses? Because when you've spent enough time feeling overlooked, it starts changing the way you see yourself. You begin assuming that if someone better walks into their life, they'll choose them instead of you. That if someone more exciting shows up, you'll be forgotten. So you keep your expectations low. You tell yourself you're fine on your own. But the truth is, there's still a small part of you that wonders what it would feel like To have someone who doesn't hesitate, someone who doesn't disappear when things get complicated, someone who looks at you and doesn't need time to decide. They just know, and maybe the scariest part of all is realizing how badly you still want that, even after everything, even after the doubt, even after convincing yourself you don't need it. That small part of you still hopes that one day someone will walk into your life and prove that all those fears were wrong. But here's something most people don't realize when they ask that question. Will I ever be loved? The problem isn't that you're unlovable. The problem is that when you've been hurt enough times, you start measuring your worth by the people who didn't stay. You start using their choices as proof that you weren't enough, proof that you were easy to leave, proof that maybe love just isn't something meant for you. But those people were never the judges of your value. They were just people who passed through your life. And sometimes people leave not because you lacked something, but because they were never meant to stay long enough to see everything you are. The truth is, love doesn't happen on a schedule. Some people find it early. They meet someone at 18, 20, 22, and it feels like their life's just clicked into place. But for a lot of people, it takes longer. Not because they're less worthy, but because the kind of love they're meant to have requires the right person. And the right person isn't someone who hesitates about you. It's not someone who keeps you guessing. It's not someone who makes you question whether you matter. The right person doesn't make you feel like you're asking for too much just by wanting to be chosen. They make it clear, effortlessly. And when that kind of love finally shows up, it doesn't feel like chasing. It doesn't feel like proving yourself. It doesn't feel like begging someone to stay. It feels calm, like something that was always supposed to happen just at the right time. So if you've been sitting with that question for a long time, if you've spent nights wondering whether anyone will ever truly choose you, here's the truth you need to hear. The fact that the wrong people left your life doesn't mean the right person never will enter it. It just means your story hasn't reached that chapter yet. And one day, when someone finally walks into your life and stays without hesitation, you'll realize something that used to be impossible to believe. You were never unlovable. You were just waiting for someone who could actually see you. There's a version of you that exists only in your head. It's the version that said the wrong thing in that conversation 3 years ago and is still replaying it. The version that's already prepared a full emotional response to a fight that hasn't happened yet. The version that read one slightly short text message and spent 45 minutes building a case for why everything is falling apart. That version of you is exhausting, and it never sleeps. And if you're being honest, it runs a lot more of your life than you'd like to admit. I've been thinking about this for a while, not in a clinical way. I'm not here to diagnose anything or hand you a breathing exercise, but in the way you think about something when you've lived inside it long enough that you finally want to understand it. When the pattern has repeated enough times that you're done being surprised by it and ready to actually look at it. Because I think a lot of us are losing to our own minds, quietly, daily, in ways that don't look dramatic from the outside, but are absolutely exhausting from the inside. And I think we've been told it's just anxiety, it's just overthinking. Take a walk, drink some water, journal about it. And none of that is wrong exactly, but it's also not quite getting at the thing. The thing is deeper than a habit, it's closer to a worldview. Let me start at the beginning, or at least the beginning as I understand it. Your mind learned to do this. It wasn't born doing it. At some point, probably pretty early, you were in a situation where paying close attention to other people's moods and signals and the slightest shifts in their behavior was actually useful. Where catching the early warning signs kept you from getting hurt. Where being one step ahead of a situation meant you could manage it before it managed you. So your brain got good at that. Really good. Exceptionally, almost professionally good at scanning for threat. At noticing the micro shift in someone's tone and running it through a threat assessment model at lightning speed. At filling in the gaps between what people say and what they might mean with worst case scenarios, because worst case scenarios are what your brain learned to prepare for. That was adaptive once. It kept you safe. It helped you navigate something that was genuinely hard to navigate, but you carried it out of that situation and into every situation after it. And now you're threat scanning in a text message from someone who loves you. Now you're running worst case scenarios about a meeting that hasn't happened yet. Now you're braced for impact in environments that are not actually dangerous, with people who are not actually threatening, because your nervous system never got the memo that the original thing ended. It's still doing its job. The job is just wrong for where you are now. Here's what overthinking actually feels like from the inside, because I think it gets flattened into a word, overthinking, and that word doesn't capture the texture of it. It starts with a small thing, almost always a small thing that your mind snags on the way a nail snags a piece of clothing, something someone said or didn't say, the way a conversation ended, a silence that lasted a second too long, a tone that was slightly off from how it usually sounds. Most people's brains would register that small thing, file it under probably nothing, and move on. Your brain doesn't do that. Your brain picks it up and starts turning it over, looking at it from every angle, running through possible explanations, building a context around it. And because your brain is very good at building context, because you are honestly an intelligent and perceptive person, the context it builds is detailed, specific, coherent. It has internal logic, it hangs together. It just might be completely wrong. And here's the brutal part. You know it might be wrong. Somewhere in there, underneath all the architecture your brain is constructing, there's a quieter voice saying, you don't actually know this. You're guessing this might be nothing. But the louder voice, like the one with all the evidence it's been collecting, the one that has built this whole case, that voice is very convincing. It has receipts. It has a timeline. It has a narrative that makes sense, so you believe it, or at least you half believe it, enough to act on it, enough to pull back a little or go quiet or preemptively protect yourself from a wound that might not be coming. And then the thing you were afraid of might actually happen, not because you were right, but because the way you responded to your own fear created the distance you were trying to prevent. That's the loop. That's the one that runs your life if you let it. I want to talk about relationships specifically because I think this is where the overthinking mind does its most significant damage. And I think it's because relationships are inherently ambiguous. People are complicated, communication is imperfect, feelings shift. And ambiguity is exactly the kind of environment where an overthinking brain absolutely goes to town. You're with someone, or close to being with someone, and things are good, things are genuinely good, but your brain doesn't fully trust good. Good feels precarious. Good feels like a setup for something. So even while things are good, there's a part of you that's quietly scanning for the thing that's going to make it not good. And because you're scanning for it, you find things. Not because they're definitely there, but because if you look hard enough at anything, any relationship, any person, you will find ambiguity. You will find moments that could be read multiple ways. You will find evidence for almost any narrative if that's what you're building. So you find something, a slightly distant response, a canceled plan, a moment where they seemed somewhere else, and the machine kicks in. And now you're building the case for why this is falling apart while simultaneously pretending everything is fine. Because you know that bringing this up will make you seem crazy, will make you seem like too much, so you hold it. You process it internally. You have the conversation in your head 100 times. You prepare for outcomes that haven't happened. You grieve things that are still here. And all of that invisible work, all of that mental labor that the other person has no idea is happening, exhausts you, makes you quieter than you actually are, makes you pull back when you want to be close, makes you act in ways that are slightly misaligned with how you actually feel, because you're not responding to reality. You're responding to the story your brain wrote about reality, and eventually, inevitably, the other person notices that something is off, not what's actually off. They can't see that. It's all internal. Just that something is off, and they adjust. And you interpret their adjustment as confirmation of the story you already wrote, and the loop tightens. Here's the part I want to sit with for a minute, because I think it's the part that gets missed. Overthinking isn't just a processing style. It's also, underneath everything, a form of control. Stay with me on this. When you can't control whether someone is going to hurt you, and you never can. That's just the fundamental vulnerability of caring about people. Your brain finds another way to feel in control. It prepares, it anticipates, it runs every possible scenario so that when something goes wrong, at least you saw it coming. At least you're not blindsided. At least the pain arrives in a context you already built. Because being blindsided feels worse than being right about something bad. Being surprised by loss feels more devastating than having predicted it. So your brain works very hard, all the time, to make sure you are never surprised. The cost of that is never being fully present, never being fully relaxed into something good, always holding a part of yourself back, just in case, always watching the door even when you're inside somewhere warm. It's a terrible trait, but it feels like the safer one, and your brain is always going to root toward what feels safe. Let me tell you what the really insidious version of this looks like. Because the everyday overthinking, the text analysis, the reading of rooms, the pre-lived arguments, that stuff is visible enough that you can at least identify it. The insidious version is quieter. It's the way you talk yourself out of good things before they have a chance to become good. Someone shows interest, and instead of letting yourself feel that, you immediately start cataloging their flaws. Not because they're actually deal breakers, because if you can find enough flaws, then when it doesn't work out, you can point to the flaws. You already knew you were never fully in it. It's the way you self-sabotage in advance. Pull back before they can pull back. End it before it can end badly. Leave before you can be left. It's the way you rewrite your own history to confirm the story your brain likes to tell. You felt something real, and then it hurt. And now when you look back at it, your brain has quietly edited the memory so that the signs were always there. You should have known. You were naive to trust it. Look how clearly it was written on the wall from the beginning. It wasn't written on the wall from the beginning. You were just present, open, hoping, the way a person is supposed to be. And something went wrong. And now your brain is retroactively building the case that you should have been closed. Because being closed would have hurt less. Being closed would have hurt less. And also produced nothing. And also made you smaller. And also been a kind of living death. But your brain doesn't calculate for aliveness, it calculates for safety. And sometimes safety and aliveness point in completely opposite directions. I've been thinking about the relationship between overthinking and self-worth, because I don't think they're separate things. I think a lot of people who overthink, not all, but a lot, do it because somewhere underneath the mental noise, there is a quiet belief that they are more likely to be rejected than not, that if someone really knew them, they'd leave. That the connection they feel is always more fragile than it appears, because they are, in some fundamental way, more difficult to love than other people, and the overthinking is partly an attempt to manage that. If you can see the rejection coming, you can prepare. If you can find the evidence early, you're not naive. If you hold back a little, you're protected. But also, and this is the part that's harder to say, the overthinking feeds that belief. Because when you're constantly generating worst case scenarios, constantly looking for the signs of leaving, constantly preparing for the end, you are practicing the belief that the end is inevitable. You are rehearsing it. You are making it more real in your body and your nervous system every single time you run the simulation. The mind is very literal about what it practices. If you practice being rejected, your brain gets better at feeling rejected. If you spend enough time preparing for loss, your nervous system stops distinguishing between the preparation and the actual thing. You end up carrying the emotional weight of a loss that hasn't happened. And you do that every day, for weeks, months, years. And then people ask why you seem tired. So what do you do with it? I'm not going to pretend I have the full answer. I don't think the full answer exists in a way that can be written down and handed to you, but I do think there are some true things worth saying. The first one is, your thoughts are not facts. I know that sounds like something on a motivational poster, and I'm sorry about that because it's actually a profound and difficult thing to practice. Your mind produces thoughts the way your body produces heat, constantly, automatically, without your permission. And not all of those thoughts are accurate. Not all of those thoughts deserve to be believed. The feeling of certainty that your brain attaches to its worst case scenarios is not evidence that those scenarios are real. It's just evidence that your brain is very good at its job. The second one is, presence is the antidote, and presence is hard. Because presence means actually being in the moment you're in, not the moment your brain has already moved to. It means feeling the good thing while it's happening, instead of scanning it for the reasons it won't last. It means trusting, not blindly, not naively, but with the actual evidence in front of you, that right now, things are okay. Letting okay be okay without immediately upgrading it to a threat. The third one, and this is the one that took me the longest, is that you have to grieve the version of safety that overthinking promises. Because it does promise something. It promises that if you think hard enough, prepare enough, stay alert enough, you will be protected. You will not be caught off guard. You will not be hurt in the ways you've been hurt before. That promise is a lie, but it's a comforting lie. And giving it up means accepting that you cannot think your way to safety in relationships. You cannot prepare your way out of vulnerability. The only way through is actually through, open, present, willing to be surprised by both the good and the bad. That is terrifying if you are someone who has been hurt, and most of the people reading this have been hurt. But the alternative, staying inside the machine, living in the pre-lived loss, holding yourself back from the full experience of being alive with another person, that's not safety. That's just a slower kind of missing out. Your mind gets the best of you because it loves you in its way. It is trying to protect you. It learned something once about how the world works, and it has been faithfully applying that lesson ever since. Even when the lesson no longer applies, even when the environment changed and the people changed and you changed, it doesn't know it's out of date. It just keeps running the old program, trying to keep you safe, costing you peace. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not fundamentally harder to love than other people. You are someone whose brain learned to be very careful, and that carefulness served a purpose once, and now it's costing you more than it's protecting you. And the work, the long, uncomfortable, ongoing, nonlinear work, is teaching it that it's okay to put the armor down. Not all the way, not all at once. Just enough to let something real get in. Just enough to be here, actually here, in the life you're living instead of the one your mind keeps rehearsing. That's the whole thing, that's all of it. Let yourself be here. You're always the loser. There's a version of losing that nobody prepares you for. Not the kind where you fail a test or lose a job or get broken up with in a parking lot while your hazards are still on. That kind of losing is clean. It hurts, but it has a shape. You know what you lost. You know when it happened. You can point to the moment and say, that's the one. That's where it went wrong. The kind I'm talking about doesn't have a moment. It's the kind where you keep showing up, keep trying, keep being the bigger person, keep choosing the high road, and somehow, at the end of all of it, you're still the one sitting alone wondering where you went wrong. You did everything right, or at least you did more right than wrong, and you still lost. Not once, every time, and you start to wonder if that's just your thing, if losing is just something that happens to you specifically. I've been thinking about this for a while now, not in a wallowing way, more like there's something here I haven't named yet, and I need to name it before it keeps running my life. Because I think most of us who always end up losing in relationships, friendships, romantic stuff, family stuff, doesn't matter. We don't lose because we're bad at this. We lose because of something that looks like a strength from the outside, something that people compliment us for, something we were taught was the right way to be. We lose because we care more. And I know how that sounds. I know I care too much is the thing everyone says when they want to avoid accountability. Like, yeah, sure, buddy, you care too much. That's why you burned the whole thing down. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the person who cares so much they become controlling or jealous or obsessive. That's a different thing. I'm talking about the person who genuinely, quietly, consistently loves people harder than those people love them back, and keeps doing it, and can't stop, and doesn't know why. That person always loses. Not dramatically, just slowly, over and over again. Let me back up. I think it starts young. Not in some deep trauma way. I'm not trying to make this a therapy session, but I do think most of us learned early what role we were playing, and some of us learned that our role was to be the one who holds things together. Maybe you were the kid who noticed when mom was in a mood and adjusted accordingly. Maybe you were the one in your friend group who everyone came to when stuff was falling apart. But when your stuff was falling apart, you kind of just handled it yourself because it felt like too much to ask. Maybe you were the sibling who kept the peace, the partner who apologized first even when you weren't wrong, just because the silence was too heavy. You learned that love looked like management, like anticipation, like making yourself small enough that everyone else could be big. And here's the thing, and it worked. People liked you, people needed you, people said you were the glue, the rock, the steady one. Nobody asked if the glue was tired, so you kept going. You got good at it, really good. You got so good at reading rooms and adjusting and being whatever the situation needed that you kind of forgot to figure out what you needed. Or maybe you knew somewhere, but asking for it felt like breaking a rule you didn't write, but somehow agreed to. And that pattern, that beautiful, exhausting, self-erasing pattern, follows you into every relationship you ever have. Here's how it plays out in practice. You meet someone, it could be a friend, could be someone you're falling for, doesn't matter. You connect, it feels real. And from the jump, you're in it, you're present, You remember the details. You follow up on the thing they mentioned 2 weeks ago. You show up when you said you would. You notice when something's off and you say something. They like this about you. They tell you. You're different, they say. You actually listen. You actually care. And you feel it. That warmth of being seen, of being valued, of finally being in something that feels like it matches what you've been putting out for years. Except, slowly, quietly, you start to notice the math doesn't add up. You text first most of the time. You're the one who makes the plan. When something good happens to you, you tell them, and they respond warmly but briefly and then pivot to themselves. And when something good happens to them, you ask follow-up questions. You want to know everything. You're genuinely excited for them. They don't do that for you. Not in the same way, and you tell yourself it's fine. People show love differently. You can't expect everyone to be exactly like you. That would be unfair. That would be projecting. So you keep going. But then something hard happens to you, something real, and you reach out and they're supportive, but it feels surface level, like they're being a good person in the way you are a good person to a coworker you don't know that well. Polite, present, but not in it with you. And you know the difference. You know what it feels like when someone is actually in it with you because you've been in it with them. You know what it feels like to sit with someone in their hard thing. You've done it. You're good at it. They're not doing that. They're being kind, but they're not in it with you. And here's the moment. Here's the fork in the road that most of us don't even know we're standing at. You could say something. You could name it. You could say, hey, I feel like I'm carrying more of this than you are, and I need that to change. But you don't, because that feels like an accusation. Because you don't want to be the person who keeps score. Because what if you're wrong? What if you're being too sensitive? What if bringing it up ruins the whole thing and then you lose them anyway and it's your fault? So you say nothing and you adjust your expectations down a little and you keep going. And 6 months later, you're half the person you were when you started this and they're exactly the same and you're exhausted and you don't even know why. That's the loss. That's the one that doesn't have a moment. I want to talk about the hope problem, because I think hope is actually the engine of all of this. Not hope in the inspirational poster sense. I mean hope in the very specific, very quiet sense of, I think if I keep being this way, eventually it'll come back to me. You believe somewhere underneath everything that love is a long game, that consistency gets rewarded, that if you keep showing up and being real and caring deeply enough, one day the person on the other end of it will match you. Will finally see what you've been putting out and rise to meet it. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes people do wake up. Sometimes the thing you've been patient for actually blooms, but a lot of the time, and I think most of us know this but don't want to say it, a lot of the time, the hope is just delay. It's a way of not having to grieve something that's clearly already gone. Because as long as you're hoping, you don't have to admit that the version of this you wanted was never actually available. That's brutal to accept. That someone you love genuinely, deeply, for real, that someone might just not be built to love you back the way you need. Not because they're bad, not because you did anything wrong, just because they're different. They're wired different. They're at a different place. They need different things. You can love someone and still be wrong for each other. You can care about someone and still be the wrong shape for the hole they're trying to fill. That is a complete sentence. That is the whole truth. There's no fix at the end of it. And when you're the person who loves more, when you're always the one who's more in it, more invested, more hopeful, that truth hits different. Because it means all that extra love you were putting out wasn't the solution. It was just yours. It lived in you. It didn't change anything. That's the part that makes you feel like a loser. But here's where I want to sit for a second, because I've been turning this over for a while and I think there's something we get wrong about what losing actually means. We treat losing like it's about outcome. You win if the relationship lasts. You lose if it ends. You win if they choose you. You lose if they don't. You win if you stop caring first. You lose if you still care when they've already moved on. By that math, yeah. If you're the one who cares more, you lose every time. You will always be the last one in and the last one out and the one who misses it the longest. But I'm not sure that's actually losing. I think what we call losing in love is often just feeling more. And feeling more is not the same as being worth less. It is not a character flaw. It is not a weakness. It is actually one of the rarest things a person can have. Most people spend their whole lives looking for someone who will love them with real depth, real presence, someone who actually listens, who actually shows up, who actually stays. And you who always ends up on the losing side of this, you are that person. You are the thing other people are searching for. The problem isn't that you care too much. The problem is that you keep handing that to people who can't hold it. And I know that sounds like I'm just reframing the same loss as a gift, which is a little bit of a cope. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. You can call it beautiful all you want, but it still hurts to be in a mostly empty thing when you wanted something full. But I do think there's a real difference between I keep losing because something is wrong with me, and I keep losing because I keep choosing people who can't match what I'm bringing. One of those is a sentence about your worth. The other is a sentence about your pattern. And patterns can change. Worth can't, because it was never the issue. Let me talk about the aftermath for a second, because I think that's where the real damage lives. When you've been the one who cared more enough times, something shifts in you. You start to get suspicious of your own feelings. You fall for someone and there's this voice in the back of your head, quiet but consistent, that says, I don't. You know how this goes, you know where you end up. So you hedge, you hold back a little, you don't text as much as you want to. You don't say the thing you're feeling right away. You play it cooler than you are because you've learned somewhere in your body that the full version of you is too much. And then, and this is the part that's really something, you end up in relationships where you're actually not fully present, where you're performing a version of yourself that's been dialed back. And those relationships don't work either, because you're not actually in them. And you lose those too. So now you're losing when you care too much and losing when you try to care less. There's no version of this that's working, and the voice in the back of your head gets louder. See? You told you. You're just bad at this. You always lose, but you're not bad at it. You're just protecting yourself with a tool that's hurting you. The hedging, the holding back, the performance of indifference, that's not protection. That's just a different kind of losing. Slower, quieter, but still losing. Because you end up alone anyway. Except this time you're also not yourself. I think the thing that actually needs to change, and I'm saying this as much to myself as anyone, is not the caring. Don't stop caring. Please don't let the world do that to you. The thing that needs to change is the selection, where you're putting it. Because if you're honest, really honest, you probably knew early. You probably saw the signs, the texts, that were always a little shorter than yours, the way they talked about their ex with a little too much energy, going either direction, the way they went quiet when you needed them to go loud, the way the effort was always a little asymmetrical. You saw it, and you talked yourself out of it. Because they had so many other good things, and who are you to expect everything? And maybe you're asking for too much, and maybe you just need to give it time. Time doesn't fix asymmetry. Time just shows you what was always true. You have to get better at believing people when they show you who they are early. Not cynically, not with your walls up from the jump, but with your eyes open, with the part of you that actually knows what it needs allowed to speak, without being immediately overruled by the part of you that just wants it to work. The right person is not going to require you to shrink yourself to make the relationship function. The right person is not going to make you wonder consistently where you stand. The right person is not going to be a project you're optimistic about. They're going to be someone who makes the asymmetry hard to find because they're actually trying. That person exists. I genuinely believe that. And I think the reason a lot of us haven't found them yet is not because we're unlovable or broken or too much. It's because we keep confusing potential with reality. We keep loving the idea of someone at the expense of the truth of them. So here's where I land on this. You're always the loser. Yeah, in a specific, limited, outcome-based reading of the word. Sure, you care more, you hurt more, you stay longer, you miss it harder when it's gone. But you're not losing at the thing that actually matters. You're not losing your capacity to feel. You're not losing your ability to be present for someone. You're not losing your willingness to be vulnerable even after it's burned you, even though it probably should have made you colder by now, but it didn't. That's not a bug. That is, genuinely, without irony, the whole thing. That's the part of a person that makes love feel like love instead of just convenience. You've been calling it a weakness your whole life because it's kept costing you. But it was never the problem. It was always the best thing about you. The world just kept putting it in front of the wrong people. That's a solvable thing. It's a slow, uncomfortable, sometimes heartbreaking thing to solve. But it's solvable. You're not cursed, you're not broken, you're not destined to always be on the losing side of this. You just need to stop handing your rarest quality to people who don't know what to do with it and start giving it to someone who already knows what they have.